Hello and welcome to 15-Minute Brew with JTJ. I'm Lorraine McGuinness,
And
and
I'm Ger
that over
Luby.
there exactly is Ger Luby, Mr. Ger Luby. Today's topic is around constructive dismissal and what that is and a specific example. All right. If anyone is unaware, myself and Ger are trained in human resources. So we have a bit of a background, a bit of knowledge around this topic. But we felt that this one is important to cover because it is very different to other cases that you might bring to the Workplace Relations Commission, the WRC, as people may know it as. From my understanding, Jerry, you can correct me, constructive dismissal is under the Unfair Dismissals Act, and it is a specific point of dismissal where the employee feels that they've been pushed out of their job, that the last resort was to leave their job due to work conditions of their job, right? But the key difference here is that the onus of proof is for you to prove that that happened, not the other way around. And it has to be a clear-cut case. It has to be very obvious that it has happened. So it's very, very difficult to prove if you're an employee going for constructive dismissal. Would I be correct in saying that, Jared? Do you have
Yeah,
anything to add
that's
on
right.
that?
That's right. It has to be very black and white. I suppose that just for people who are joining us from outside of Ireland, the Workplace Relations Commission is an Irish body that's established to deal with problems that people have in the workplace that can't be resolved in the workplace. If they can't be resolved at the Workplace Relations Commission, they can go on further. But the Workplace Relations Commission does have the ability to make recommendations, and it can fine employees and stuff like that, and the legislation is Irish legislation. However, it would be consistent with European law in particular, and general good practice, I suppose, in human resources over the world.
Thank you for that as well. We are based in Ireland for those who are listening in. So a lot of the things we talk about will be from our perspective in the Irish market, European market. All right. But this topic, the reason why we're talking about this today is because I noticed or I saw a link, an article in the Irish Independent about an eBay worker who went to the WRC claiming constructive dismissal. And of course, in the newspaper, you won't have all of the details. It's just a snapshot of what was said, what is produced. But you are, if people are interested, you are able to search for all cases on the WRC. They are public domain. They're knowledge for people to learn from. Essentially, this worker believed that they weren't nurturing their situation enough because they were going through some personal issues. He was going through a very difficult time. He was late to work because he was relying on public transport, and he was complaining about the fact that he was brought up under work avoidance because he went to the bathroom and took 4 minutes away from his workstation. So he felt that the environment was a bit toxic, for want of a better word, that it wasn't bearable for him to work in there anymore. So he left, he quit his job, and then filed this case. This is where it gets interesting because that person then had to produce all the evidence to the WRC, and the company could also produce the evidence on their behalf. It's like any investigation, any legal case, you have to have your evidence. In a nutshell, and we will get into why the outcome was the way it was, he was unsuccessful with his case. And I think that we both have our own reasons as to why that was. And it was stated as well in the article, but mostly, what would you think, Ger, was the reasons behind
Okay,
it?
well, if you look at the case, I think sometimes when you see things like this in the media or in newspapers, you know, it can lead with employee left because he was pulled up for taking a 4 minute bathroom break. Is taking a 4 minute bathroom break work avoidance? Strictly speaking, in most people's heads, it probably isn't. However, I suppose it's all about the procedure that was followed. Okay,
Mhm.
so in any workplace situation, if you've got a grievance, if you think something is not fair, and I think that the employee was referring to other previous kind of low level disciplinary stuff around lateness and stuff like that, where life had been made uncomfortable for them. In respect of this particular case, what he did was, I think he received a warning. Did he receive a warning? I think he did.
He
Uh,
received a warning for the lateness. He received a informal, in his words, an informal verbal warning
yeah,
for, I think, the work avoidance
yeah,
element.
okay. And he basically upped and left. It was like he said, work is no longer tenable for me in this environment.
Hmm.
Really, in any case like this, what you've got to be seeing to be doing, especially when you're escalating it to a statutory body like the Workplace Relations Commission, uh, is to show that you have been following the established procedure. So in your contract, in your company handbook, if you have one, it's always going to have, sometimes problems are going to arise. This is the grievance procedure that you must follow in order to make yourself heard and to have all of the facts of your particular grievance aired out. This worker instead, unfortunately, he just left. Okay,
Hmm.
so he didn't follow the procedure, and therefore, when you go to an agency like the Workplace Relations Commission, they're not going to look at you. To be honest with you, whether you're right or wrong, it has to be really, 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 really bad for you to for them to rule in your favor if
Hmm.
you haven't followed the procedure. And the procedure was lodge a grievance, have it investigated. Everybody talks amongst themselves. Often you'll see a union representative might come in and help somebody in. I'm not sure whether or not there is a union in eBay in Ireland, but a union representative or a staff representative or a colleague that you trust, none of that was followed. And as soon as that's not followed, you're on a hiding to nothing, really, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I think the other thing as well is you mentioned the contract, the handbook, and things like that, right? We're not going to go into this now, but that's very important because the work practices are outlined there. And I think one of the reasons why it was maybe work avoidance is because how they close calls and emails and things at eBay. And I think he failed to do that, meaning that he's unavailable to take any more calls or anything until that one was closed or something along those lines.
He was my understanding is, was he a call center person?
Yeah, he was, I think, a
Yeah.
customer in customer service maybe or something like
Okay.
that. Yeah, yeah. So you can understand that there would be a large volume of there's also people who are users who are buying things from eBay, but also sellers. There's shops, there's vendors, there's a lot of things happening on the website. And I think there was just something he wasn't following properly. So he was reprimanded for the 4 minutes. They're not saying you can't take a break. That's not what they're saying. It's more the procedure wasn't followed properly. So, and I don't think it was the first time.
Yeah.
If it was the first time and it was such an aggressive maybe approach or something, fair enough. But initially, a verbal warning is pretty standard anyway to say, hey, just be mindful of this. That's the start of the process for the
Yeah,
company's perspective.
and
So,
even the language of a warning, a verbal warning, like a verbal warning is that a verbal warning? Or is it worthy of a verbal warning, or is it just a little bit of coaching and saying, look, Ger, you haven't marked yourself as being away from the desk, you've marked or whatever it was.
mhm.
Can you just make sure of it the next time? For a manager to actually go through to hit some form of a disciplinary process, even at a very low level, they don't really have the time for that, surely.
But we don't know if it was the
No,
first time. That's what I
exactly.
mean. So
That's what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah. So that's what, again, the WRC will
Yeah,
look at. Is this the first time? And probably they came with, no, it's not the first time. We have the logs, we
yeah.
have logs of your workstations and things. So constructive dismissal is very much a nuanced element, I think, under the Act. And be prepared if you decide to take a case against your employer on it, I think.
Yeah, I would very much recommend anybody, if you're in Ireland, have a look at the WRC website, and they publicize their rulings every week, every 10 days or so,
Mm,
and you can read cases, and sometimes you think, oh, this is an open and shut case, and they're going to rule with the employee or they're going to rule with the employer, and sometimes based on the headline, you'll make that call yourself, but you can be surprised. And usually, where cases at the WRC fall down, or similar bodies throughout the world, is that somebody, be it on the employer or the employee side, hasn't followed process. And sometimes people get, on the other side of it, sometimes people get awards for unfair dismissal when they have done something really, really, really awful, but the employer hasn't followed through on their process. And hey, presto, we've got an unfair dismissal claim successfully taken, and
won. So
that's it.
if anyone has any comments on this, any experiences they want to share, let us know, and we'll be happy to discuss it further. See you soon.
See you soon, guys.